subdivision we don't have councils either. Not preliminaries and stuff.
All right. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Kaysville Planning Commission meeting for the August 11th, 2022 edition. We have our first item of business is approval of the minutes from the July 28th, 2022 meeting. So do we have anybody, hopefully you had a chance to read through the minutes. Do we have any additions or subtractions? Entertain a motion for approval.
Motion to approve minutes of the last one.
Okay,
Second.
perfect. Let's just do a voice vote all together. All those that are approve?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we have a unanimous vote for approval of the minutes. And then our next item.
Excuse me. I forgot to vote. Aye.
Oh, thank
My
you.
speaker wasn't on. I was
Sorry.
fumbling around.
Is it not very loud? I'll try to make sure I speak
There we
right
go.
into it.
There we go.
I'll
I
speak
was
right
fumbling.
into
My
it.
bad.
It was Josh on the second, right, for the minutes?
Yeah.
That's correct. So we have our next item in business, the swearing in of Rachel Lott as a planning commissioner.
Yep, we'll have Mindy do this. And Rachel, to make it a little bit easier on you, I do have what you would repeat after Mindy on the
Wow.
screen.
That's pretty cool.
It's a lot to remember.
All right, I, Rachel Lott,
I, Rachel Lott,
having been appointed
to
the office of Kaysville City Planning Commission member,
the office of Kaysville City Planning Commission member,
do solemnly swear and or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States
obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Awesome, congratulations.
Thank you.
Excited to have you, and I'll just have you sign right here, and then she's legit. Okay, congratulations.
Welcome, Commissioner Lott. We're glad to have you. This for you, that anybody that is planning to speak later on one of the items, and make sure that you sign up on the list. Is that still outside, or is it?
I brought the list in just to sign up. I think we'll just,
Does it matter, or will we just take anybody that wants to come forward, or?
Yeah, we just want to have a record of who was here in attendance, so if you'll just sign in your name. And then I think the easiest thing to do is just when you open up the public hearing, just have people come up.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. All right, so our next item of business is the final plat subdivision approval for Hinkley Subdivision for Clint Taylor. We'll turn it over to the staff for their report.
All right. So we just had this, they did a pretty quick turnaround, which is easy when it's just a two-lot subdivision, but this is the final plat for the Hinkley subdivision. It's located at 815 North Berkshire Drive. There is currently a single-family home on the lot, which is 0.63 acres. It's zoned R18, and they are subdividing to create two individual lots. One will keep the current home on, and there's also an accessory structure, and then the other lot will just be a vacant lot that would become available for development. The two lots that'll be created will be, one's just under 12,000 square feet, and the other one's 15,254 square feet. To give just a little bit of context to the area, again, it's 815 North Berkshire Drive, and the property that we are discussing is the one highlighted in blue there. The next two slides will just kind of show, this is a zoomed in portion or a perspective of the plat in the two lots that are being created. You can see they did a jog out on that lot to accommodate the setback for the existing gazebo. And then that second lot would be created. Here is a view of the entire plat that has come back to us with the corrections that we requested from the preliminary plat. And staff is recommending that you approve the final plat subdivision for the Hinkley subdivision. If you have any questions, I will answer them.
I have a question. In the staff report, under item number 2, it says public noticing and public comment. Do we actually send notice on final plats?
We do not.
Okay.
So we may have missed that, but we do put up a sign on the property for the preliminary plat.
Yeah.
We don't do any noticing for the final
Good.
plat.
I'm actually relieved to hear that. I think that's kind of overkill, but in case we were, I was going to recommend that we don't do that.
No.
Any other questions for the staff? Or the two?
And I should, if I may, Chair, just for the benefit of our new commissioner that's here this evening. So a subdivision is one of those items that, as long as what's before us meets code, we are obligated to approve it. And so that's where, staff, these items come in, we review, we make sure that it meets the zoning code. We look at the subdivision code, which is Title 19, and make sure that everything is in line with those two codes. And then when they are, we bring it forward. And the preliminary plat subdivision is, we bring that through, everything kind of gets set up. And there may be a few minor corrections that are needed. And then when the final plat comes through, that's when everything's just really set in stone. The corrections have been made, and then the city engineer continues to work on construction drawings. But so we have 2 final plat subdivisions on the agenda this evening. And so since they meet code, then essentially the commission's obligated to approve that.
Okay. And do we have the Taylors here this evening? Would they like to speak to this? Add anything to what the staff report has given? Okay. Any other discussion from the commissioners?
I'll make a motion to approve the subdivision based on the staff report and compliance with the administrative code of the city of Kaysville City, and that it complies with our ordinances.
Do we have a second?
Second.
So first from motion from Commissioner Allred and a second from Commissioner Summercorn. We'll start the voting with Commissioner Sunloff.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye for me.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so the voting is unanimous in favor. Our next item of business is the final plat subdivision approval for Huckleberry Estates for Lint, Robert, and Linda Bourne. And I will turn over to the staff for the report for this item.
All right, this one is located at 1742 West Phillips Street. It's 2.54 acres. This will be a 5-lot subdivision, and there is a PRUD overlay. It's zoned R1LD, which means that as long as the average lot size is 20,000 square feet, I think, or is it half acre? It's 2 per acre. As long as the average lot size meets that 2 per acre, the lot sizes can vary. The lot sizes do vary from 17,886 square feet to 22,921 square feet. Again, just to give a little bit more context, this is the location of the property. And kind of a zoomed in view of the plat and the 5 lots as I could get. It shows that Bourne Drive would be and Huckleberry Way would be a private street coming off of Phillips. And that lot number 1 is, there's a home existing on there, and that home would remain. The other 4 lots would be available for development. The Bournes are subdividing this property, and their intent is to let their children build homes there. So this is the overall plat that just shows the rest of the requirements that we have on the plat. Again, staff engineering has reviewed this for planning and for subdivision code requirements. It meets those requirements, and we're recommending approval of the final plat. I don't know if the Huckleberries, if the Bournes are here this evening. Oh, okay, I see them back there. So if there's any questions you may have for them, they're here.
Okay, great. So, Commissioners, any questions for the staff?
Did we already see this at the final plat stage?
So this was approved, I should have mentioned this, because this was approved under preliminary plat under the name of the Bourne Estates subdivision. So they decided they wanted to have it called Huckleberry Estates. And so may not ring a bell because of that change, but the preliminary plat was approved by the City Council back in March, and they've spent the last few months getting everything in place to bring the final plat back.
Any questions for the Bournes, or do you have anything you'd like to add to what the staff has reported?
I have a question. Last time you were here, I had a few corrections and stuff like that. Do you remember that? Were those incorporated? I'm just curious, not like I'm the boss. I'm just, okay, good. Yeah. There were a few typos, few errors, so. And then I have a question for staff. In terms of the PRUD, is this a conditional use?
It is not. It's just a
Just an administrative overlay?
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I ask is, and then the other follow-up question is, not all of the lots, I like the, that you have to have 20,000 per lot, but is there a minimum lot size within that? In other words, you have, the overall meets it, but is there a minimum lot size? Could they have gone in there, for example, and done a 5,000 square foot lot and had 4 or 5 lots well over, 20,000?
I'd have to double check in the code. I don't think there is a minimum lot
Okay.
size. I think it's just the average lot size has to be, it has to equal 2 per acre. But I can check that.
No, don't bother. The reason I'm asking is because the flexibility in land use ordinances is really a beautiful thing until it ruffles somebody's feathers.
Right.
And in this case, where I'm specifically aware that there are many people, especially senior citizens, who'd like to have like a single level on a small lot. If somebody were to propose that within this zone, and we don't have a provision on a minimum lot size, that could be really great until the first time it happens, and then what happens is City Council will hear that, well, you should make sure that there's nothing under 10,000 or 12,000.
It's 12,000.
It's 12, okay.
Yeah.
Good, that's all I wanted to know.
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about that curveball then.
No.
Did you have a comment, Josh? Or?
I was just going to say that I'm pretty sure the reason why it's a PRUD is because of the private lane. If that were to be a public lane, this would just be this would have been a rezone to R1LD and then just a straight up preliminary and final subdivision plat without the PRUD overlay. Anytime you do a private lane per the code is what kicks it into the PRUD. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other discussion? I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the final plat for the Huckleberry Estates subdivision as outlined in the staff report, and with their assurance that all of the ordinances and checklists have been reviewed and found to be in compliance.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Allred and a second by Commissioner Sundloff. We'll start with the voting with Commissioner Lott.
Aye.
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 Okay, so it appears the voting is unanimous in favor of approval. Okay, and now we're going to have a public hearing. So we have had people sign up in the past, but we'll just call people up if you're here to speak to this. We would just ask that if you do want to speak to this particular one, when we open the public hearing, after we do the staff report, and have the applicant speak, that you keep your comments brief, and that if you find that someone else has said something that you wanted to say, you could just come up and just say, kind of second whatever someone said before. So we're not saying the same things over and over again. We have read all the comments that have come through email, so we've seen those, and we're aware of what people are commenting on that. So, but yes, we have the public hearing now for the rezone of request at 500 North Main Street from GC General Commercial District to RM Multiple Family Residential District, and we'll turn the time over to the staff for the report on this.
Great, thank you. So, first of all, thanks to all the audience members who are here tonight. We always appreciate when our residents take the time out to come to our meetings, and especially when they want to come and share their thoughts. So before I start, I'll just give a real brief overview of the process that we are beginning here. So this rezone is before us because a property owner or their representative has chosen to submit an application to the city to have the property rezoned. Any property can have an application on it as long as they pay their $400 fee and turn their application in, and then we are obligated as staff to process that. The Planning Commission serves as what's called a recommending body for a zone change. A zone change is what's considered a legislative decision. What we just saw with these two final plats, it's not anything that's discretionary, it's not legislative, it's administrative. We're obligated to approve things as long as this meets code. The legislative items are actually decided by the City Council. So what'll happen this evening is we'll go through our presentation. We'll have some questions and answers. The public hearing will be opened, and then the Planning Commission will debate and make a motion to either recommend approval of the zone change or recommend denial of the zone change to the City Council. And then we will take this to the City Council at one of the next meetings, and they will be the ones to actually decide whether or not the zone change goes into place. As Chair Barris mentioned, there were 6 individuals that submitted emails through our Planning Commission or contact form on our website. Those have already been sent out to the Planning Commission. It's actually an automated system, so the minute somebody hits send on those, they get sent out to the Planning Commission. So those items have been sent to them and they've read them. I'll go over in a minute a little bit more about the public comments, but just to get back to where we are. So we are here tonight to talk about an application that we've received from Elite Craft Homes. The property is owned by Julie and Robert Dwarden. It's 500 North Main. It is a 0.66 acre lot, 28,749 square feet. Right now, there is a single family dwelling on the property. It's zoned general commercial. When we talk about residential zoning, we use the terminology of density. There really is no density entitlement in the general commercial district, but the zone request is to go to RM, the multiple family residential, and just based on the square footage of the site and what our code allows, if they could make it fit, they could build up to 10 units on this property. Multiple family residential could be townhomes, which is the product that they're proposing. It could be an apartment complex. It could be, row housing. But the difference between single family and multiple family residential is just that you can have walls that are adjoining and shared versus setbacks in a single building for one single family. So again, just to give a little bit of context of the location of the property, here's where that sits at 500 North Main, and then just a more zoomed out version, give a little bit more context to the area where that's located. I also have the zone map that shows right there in the center, that 500 North Main. So there is quite a variety of zoning that is in the area. You have some RM, you have R2, you have healthcare, you have R4, obviously a lot of commercial. One of the things that, especially when we talk about zoning, what we're really talking about is what uses the property are for. So we have residential zoning, and that could be everything from single family to multifamily. General commercial, that's usually your retail, your office. So in this instance, the applicant is asking to go from a general commercial or retail office use to a residential use. And I just want to point out some of the differences between the two zoning codes and the regulations. There's no minimum lot size for general commercial, but to go to the RM zone, you have to have a minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet. This property does meet that minimum. Again, going and talking about the density, just based on the straight math, not taking into consideration what could actually fit on the site, but they would be allowed to do 10 units. The lot width, and we did verify this time, the property meets that minimum requirement of 70 feet. There's no minimum requirement in the general commercial zone. One of the things that always comes up for question too is, how tall are buildings going to be? Are they going to overpower my backyard? As it sits right now, a building could be constructed on the general commercial zone up to 35 feet. The residential multifamily would limit that to 30 feet. You can see the setbacks there. With the general commercial, there's a 20-foot setback requirement from a residential property. The RM zone has additional setbacks from the front, side, and rear. Those are detailed there. The side setback does require, it has to be at least 8 feet for a total of 16 between the two properties, and then there's an additional 2 feet that gets added on for every unit above 4 or above 2. So that varies depending on how many units that they would have. It could be as much as 16 feet. And then there's also a couple other requirements with the RM zone. There's open space requirements and then outdoor storage. When we look at whether or not we want to apply a zone change to a property, what we should refer to as our general plan, and do the goals and the objectives outlined in the general plan support that. So we have currently adopted the 2019 general plan, and so just going through that, looking at the identity and character, one of the main things is that Kaysville wants to remain primarily a residential community. This would actually support that because you're taking commercial property and turning it into residential property. And so that definitely supports remaining residential. One of the things I pointed out in the staff report, though, is that you do want to consider, does taking away commercial property make sense? We are very limited in Kaysville where we can have viable commercial locations. And so we want to be very thoughtful as we, take away some of those opportunities. Does the application of a residential zone in here make sense? Does it compensate for the loss of commercial? I don't know how to quantify that, but that'll be something that you may want to discuss. The general plan also contains an element of reserving land to promote development that is high quality, diversified, and adaptable to changing conditions. I think one of the greatest conditions of change that we have felt over the last few years has definitely been the housing shortage. And being adaptable to that is being open-minded to developments that are maybe a little bit more dense than what we normally see in Kaysville. I think the rezone supports that goal and policy as well. There's an element too that speaks to housing, and that housing should be located throughout the city and restricted only where it's incompatible with other necessary uses. It speaks of delineating some of the application of residential between east of I-15 and allowing for housing complementary to existing neighborhoods. As we saw in that zoning slide, there is quite a bit of diverse zoning within that neighborhood area. So you would want to consider that as well as you contemplate whether or not you would recommend this to the city council. Also, it speaks to having that the majority of housing should be single unit attached or detached. But then it says the city will seek to provide a variety of housing choices throughout the community, and multiple unit housing structures to consist mostly of duplexes and some 3 to 6 unit structures dispersed throughout the city. We'll get a little bit more into the concept plan that they have submitted, although at this point in time, we're only talking about zoning and the use of the property. We're really not approving a project. We're not approving what a building's going to look like, but it has become, I guess, tradition for Kaysville to look at some of the concepts along with the zoning. So also in 2019, the city adopted a plan for additional moderate income housing. There's a total of 9 objectives within that plan, but I felt that number 1, 4, 7, and 9 were germane to this application in particular. And one of those is that we would look to zoning properties to residential. The second one is permitting less costly design, materials, and construction of housing. In other contexts, we've talked about that is allowing the PRUD overlay for private streets, which reduces some of the expenses for street widths and standards that the city requires. But I think you could also make the argument that rezoning for more dense housing is permitting less costly design, materials, shared walls, those type of things. Allowing for higher densities. This is not something that I would term as high density. This is something that I would say is medium density. So allowing for higher density and moderate income residential development in commercial and mixed use zones, commercial centers or employment centers. One of the things that would be a great benefit is if an individual would be able to live very close to where they work. And so we do want to look at having some residential uses in commercial centers. And then the last one, and I think this is the strongest argument for the moderate income housing, but to rezone for densities necessary to assure the production of moderate income housing. I think it's an easy argument to make that if you're taking a single family lot and you're adding another 6 or 7 or 8 units to that, it definitely gives economies of scale of increasing the supply and creating a product that is more affordable than a single family lot on a half acre. So with that, the applicant did submit some concept plans, and I'll just kind of breeze through those because, again, as I mentioned, what we're really discussing here tonight is the use of the property, not a particular project, but the concept that they submitted, it showed 8 units. I mentioned with just the math and the 1 unit being allowed per every 2,800 square feet, they could fit 10 on the site, but when you take into consideration the layout of the site, it's a very long, narrow site. The setbacks and open space requirements, parking requirements, I think fitting any more than 8 would be pretty tricky. That's probably why they submitted the concept for 8. But if this was approved without any conditions and they figured out a way to fit 10, my guess is that they would do that. So here's just another look at some of the elevations, and then this is a 3D rendering, and then another look at the elevation of what they were proposing. So again, when we get an application and process that application, state law requires that we send out a notice to all properties that are located within 300 square feet of the subject property. Kaysville City Code wants to go above and beyond, and so we add another 200 feet to that. So we notify within a 500-foot radius, and we sent out 79 notices. We also do all the regular posting that's required to the state's public meeting notice website, our website. And we did receive some public comments. As of about 6 o'clock today, we received 6 emails about this. The comments were centered around an anti-density sentiment. There were concerns about water availability. Concerns about privacy and impacts to existing residences. There were concerns about increased traffic and crime. And there was one comment that was stating a strong preference for a community garden. My response to that individual would be, well, then buy the property and turn it into a community garden. So with that, I do think there's enough elements in the general plan that would support the recommendation of approval of the zone change to the city council. But based on what you may hear tonight in the public hearing and any other dialogue you would want to have as the commission goes forward to debate and discuss, whatever you feel comfortable with. I think the applicant is here tonight. I don't know if they have anything to add, but if you have questions for them, they would be here to answer those questions. So anything for me, I'm happy to answer questions as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we'd like to hear from the applicant if he's willing to come forward, so.
My name is Blake Bastian. I am representing Elite Craft Homes in this. I honestly don't have a whole lot more than what she has said. She kind of explained it really well. I think what we are proposing would be less impactful than some big commercial building right there, based off of the comments that I heard from the citizens. I do think that something residential right there, a multifamily, would be less impactful than a big commercial building, which could go bigger and taller than what we are proposing. So,
I mean, can you, I know this came before the planning commission and the city council a year ago, and it was rejected, and maybe you could just explain this. How was it different about this application versus what was done before? Yeah,
I was not involved with that before. We weren't the ones that applied for that before, so I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think it was probably maybe 2 or 3 years. And my recollection is I could be wrong, but that there wasn't, I don't know if it was RM number 1, and then number 2, I don't think we saw even like a concept plan. Were you here, Wilf? Do you remember? It's been, I think, probably even more than 3 years, maybe 4 or 5, but. You can enlighten us when you come up.
Yeah.
And then maybe just another question, there is obviously some public sentiment against this.
Yeah.
Have you had any outreach to the neighbors to try to,
I just got the emails today from the neighbors, and I'd be happy to sit down and discuss with them if there are solutions. I do, based off of what I did read, though, I do think that what we're proposing is less impactful than if someone went in and built a big commercial building there, since it is zoned commercial. So the heights would be less. There's more of a setback, so the buildings would be farther away from the other houses. So I do think this could be less impactful than a commercial building there. But I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone does have any throughout the whole thing. I can come back and address it.
Yeah, we'll call you back up afterwards. But are there any other questions?
Yeah, one. So in the proposed general plan update that the city is, I hope, real close to adopting at this point, it does indicate that this area, the city is looking at allowing for mixed use, which would be commercial and residential or other kinds of uses mixed. Is that something you considered at all for this property, is mixing uses?
We didn't. The reason we brought this forth, so we're building the same, pretty much the similar concept design to this across the street, and about 300 or 400 feet to the north. We're building these similar, the same layout as where we came up with the concept. So I think it fits this general area, and I know that Kaysville is in the need of, every city's in the need of denser housing. We need more units to add, so that wouldn't be something completely off the table, some mixed use, but this was the reason we brought this forth.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, yeah, we'll call you back up after the public hearing. Okay, we'll go ahead now and open the public hearing. So if you would like to comment, again, just to please keep your comments brief. And when you do approach this podium, please speak into the microphone and let us know your name and your address.
Okay, Toby, can I just ask a question that I'd like an answer to if
Yeah.
people are going to give
sure.
comments?
Go ahead.
You know, I have a lot of things that I'll say for later, but I do think it's a conundrum that this is commercial and maybe not in the current state of the size of the parcel is it conducive to a big commercial building. But if you combine it with 2 or 3 properties to the north in who knows how many years, or how, you know, the price is right, a developer comes in and wanted to do that, you could have office buildings or of some sort or of some height that are very similar to the one that's getting built just up the street closer to Tasty's. And so what I'm curious, what I would like to hear personally from the neighbors or citizens is, why would you prefer that over this? Because it's really going to be, you kind of have the choice at this point. You don't know what the commercial one's going to look like, but it has the potential to be higher and more intrusive, I think, at least in my opinion. So it's like, this is kind of a lesser of two evils argument, I think, from the citizens, and I just want to hear their opinions on that on either side. So just, I throw that out there, yeah.
Is it a 5-foot height difference with the commercial versus?
5 foot, yeah.
5 foot. So a commercial building would be 5 foot higher than.
It could potentially be,
than
yes.
this.
But there's a 20-foot setback requirement when commercial's up against residential, whereas with this, it would be 15-foot setback, I think, if what I read, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just a question that's in my mind that I'd like to hear some thoughts on.
Yeah. If you're ready to comment, come to the podium.
My name is Linda Earl. I live at 543 North Creekside Lane. First of all, I would like to address Kaysville. I love it here. I barely have been here just a little over a year, and I've loved it because of the type of community that it is. First of all, I'd like to thank the staff. I feel like your explanation of things was very helpful, very, very useful, and also going over what the vision is for Kaysville. And I can certainly want to address the need for more housing and more affordable housing. A couple things I would like to mention, though, is just as it was addressed, that our area is already pretty diverse. I feel, and many of our residents near us that can't be here because it's the end of summer and a lot of people are gone out on vacations, we feel like we've done our share of having supporting of dense properties, multifamily units and apartments in our area. And we feel like we want to keep more of a single family home situation if that was going to go to residential. And to address the issue with the commercial building, people aren't living there late at night at a high raise looking down on our property when we're trying to sit out in our backyards or in our living rooms and our kitchens at night looking down in on us. It is much different type of living for an office building than somebody who is living there with kids running around, screaming, people driving in and out, who knows what party or what kind of element is there, especially if we're talking about having, you know, more costly type living. And I'm not saying that there isn't a place for that in Kaysville, but like I said, again, just to the north of us and to the south of us, we have supported a lot of that. We are already very highly impacted by our resources, natural resources as well as services, and in our schools. Much less the traffic that would be coming in and out of that area that would be very narrow. Look at that, there's 8 parking spaces, not accounting for any visitors that would be leaving in that small area. And I think that the different times of night is much different than if we were to have a commercial building there. And so I think that that is some of the concerns that we have. And I do have a question for the representative tonight. I wanted to know, other than the property he addressed that is to the west, if there is any other whether residential or commercial work that he has done in the area in the last 5 years, and if so, what it was. And that's about what I have to say. Thank you.
Since I often forget to do this, my name is Tom Wood. I live at 901 Meadowlark Drive in Kaysville. I was not within the 500-foot zone because I never am, but I still come to talk about these things. For the benefit of a couple of you, especially Rachel, I'm a past commissioner. I am a former president of the Utah Apartment Association. I'm currently vice president of a management company in Salt Lake City. I manage and have managed apartments across the country for 35 years. So I have a little bit of experience when it comes to multifamily housing. When I served on this commission, it was 4 years ago, Josh, that the 2 lots to the northwest of this were proposed to be rezoned multifamily, and it was turned down. 4 years is approximate. I apologize, but I was still on the commission at that time. I don't remember the specific reasons why. I do know there was a general sentiment of we are extremely limited with our commercial space. That's always been kind of a sentiment. We don't have much commercial. We didn't want to lose any. We didn't want to lose those. There wasn't a plan even like what we've seen this evening of just sort of general renderings. He just kind of came with an idea. I think he probably would have gotten farther had he actually had some real plans. It was just sort of a, hey, I want to rezone, how about it? A couple things I want to address, and I will try and be brief. Not in my nature, but I will try. Josh, to your question earlier, what's going to be more impactful, commercial versus residential? We have 2 very good examples going up just up the street on Main Street. We have, it's an accounting office, I believe, that's going up. And we have condos that Garbett Homes is putting up just a block to the north. They appear identical in height, in proximity to the street. They look huge. And I don't know that the impact is going to be a whole lot different with these. If it's going to be a 3-story building, 30 feet high, 5 feet really is irrelevant. As was mentioned by the previous individual, businesses are going to be daytime. We'll have 9 to 5 kind of interaction as opposed to 24-hour interaction. This doesn't impact me personally. I live far enough away that they're not looking in my backyard. That's not really an issue for me. The big issue that I have with this, and I've had with every one of these developments that has gone up in this neighborhood, was mentioned previously, that we have in this area taken on the bulk of the multifamily housing, the high density of Kaysville, and we have for years. I've been in front of this body, I've been in front of the city council arguing this for the last 12, 15 years. When is enough? Well, previously we're supposed to be dispersed throughout the city. We disperse within a 1-mile radius of this spot. I believe it's actually 1.2, if I remember right, from this spot. More than 90% of all high-density housing in Kaysville is there. We have 2 project-based Section 8 housing projects, Francis Peak and Jerry Burnett Apartments, that are extremely close to this. Those properties I can speak to specifically. I previously worked as an auditor for HUD and did what are called management and occupancy reviews on those 2 properties, in addition to St. Mark's senior property, which is across the street from Apple Tree Senior Living. Those 3 properties are all project-based Section 8. Those come with extremely low-income individuals. Doesn't make them bad people. There are some wonderful people that I've worked with, especially at St. Mark's. I have good friends that live at St. Mark's. but there are more challenges that come with those. Speaking from an apartment standpoint, statistics will show that crime's not particularly higher. Traffic isn't going to be impacted tremendously by 8 or 10 units. I can show you statistics all day long, but my argument is and always has been disperse this throughout the city. If we would have had any high-density projects of this nature approved on the west side of Kaysville in the last 10 years, I know there's one, if we want to call it high density, just to the west of Smith's. Nothing to the point that we have currently right in this area. As I said, that is and always will be my argument, that there are benefits to the city. We need more housing. We need more affordable housing. I will fight for that all day long, but there are problems, there are concerns. I've shared with this body, I've shared with the city council, I've shared statistics about school performance, that schools on the west side of Kaysville statistically perform at a higher rate than schools in proximity to this location. I know you're probably thinking, what else does this guy do? But I'm also a substitute school teacher for Davis School District, and I teach at these schools, and I see the needs that come through with these kids who their only nourishment they get is the breakfast they receive and the lunch they receive as part of coming to Creekside Elementary or Fairfield Junior High or Kaysville Elementary. I see that up close and personal. I see those needs, and I think that this, while it is necessary in Kaysville, is not necessary here. Thank you.
My name's Steve Johnson. I live in the Hyde Park HOA subdivision. We share a property line with the proposed rezone. The acoustics in this room are really terrible, but I'm sure that was a very thorough explanation, so pardon me if I ask questions that are redundant, but it seems to me the Planning Commission should be consistent in its decisions. We were approached to have the property where that new building you referenced, Curtis Rasmussen CPA building there, on the corner of Hyde Park Lane. We were approached to see if we would annex that into our HOA if Planning Commission would just give permission to make that a residential, so we could add 3 or 4 more townhomes there down towards Main Street. And the Planning Commission, I understand, denied that request and decided it should remain commercial. So I don't understand why now, just a little bit up the street, we got a 70-foot wide lot, very deep, goes clear back to our property line, and now you want to entertain making that residential with 2-story properties, an 8-foot setback, which will destroy the enjoyment of the next door neighbor's property and a couple others there. I don't suppose that there's not going to be windows on the back of this building. And I mean, I can almost reach 8 feet to the fence. Those windows will allow people to peer right into that backyard. To us, it'd be much preferable to have that remain commercial, maintain the commercial property along that main street there. And we're not concerned about a commercial building that's even 5 feet taller because there's going to be no bedroom windows back there looking into our properties. If there's a 20-foot setback, that's even better. But I would speak to the need to just maintain that strip as commercial property and not push residential properties right against our property line that are 2 stories high. Thank you.
Hi, my name is David Black, and I'm not sure why I'm here because I lose every time I'm here. I've lived in the area for 20 years now, and I've watched consistently as high-density housing, and I would disagree. This isn't minimum density. When you put that many lots that close together with a possible of 10, there's no development agreement here. That's high density. Look at a fire truck or even a police car trying to get in there and turn around, or an ambulance trying to get to that back unit and trying to back out. We have 3 other projects going on in that area already. There's the one on Heritage Lane, there's the one on the corner that was prime commercial area that was put into more high density housing, and the one that the developer proposing this is. I was one of the ones who wrote the letter. I wouldn't call it anti-density. I think that's kind of shown some bias there by the city. We were plainly pointing out, if the city would approve these projects somewhere else in the city, we would be more than happy to take our fair share. You know, I kind of laugh when I think about how the city council voted completely unanimously in favor, against high density or medium density housing across from Davis High, but yet anything that comes in our corner of the city, they're more than happy to approve. The city plan, the city council and planning commission has talked for years about spreading out the density in the city, but their actions don't match what they say. Their actions are, let's completely put the density in one part of the city, and if there's bigger lots, people who own the houses have a little bit more money than this corner of the city, a little bit more wealth, not so much social economic diversity, we're going to do what they say, and we're not going to put it there. If we get some diversity, area that doesn't have quite the amount of money, we're going to stick them with all the density. My kids go to the schools in that area, and the turnover in those schools is amazing. My kids are always having new kids come in and move out and move in and out. And it's disruptive for the teachers. That's a challenge that other parts of the city don't face. So I'd like the city actually to, follow what they said. Spread out the density. Look out for the citizens in this area.
My name's Tony Spinello. I live on 463 Creekside Lane. I'm about probably 200 feet away from the house. And I just wanted to point out that like 3 years ago in 2019, southeast of there, right on the corner of Creekside Way in Maine, and it's not even 40 feet away from that property, they built 3 homes that are $850,000 to $875,000 homes. And I wonder what building those kind of apartments that close to them is going to do to that value. How it affects me, I worry about water. That was already mentioned. Why we're building so much, I don't understand. If you don't have resources, why would you build that much? I can't water my grass. And how long is that going to go on? And like I said, I don't have a lot more to say about that. But I don't want to approve this. I hope you don't either.
My name is Sharon Hadley, and I live in the house that is on the north side of that property. Probably as much as anyone here, I will be affected. Those 2-story houses will look right into my family room. At the time that we bought our home, all the homes in that area were single-story. And so you didn't get that issue of people being able to see into your backyard and into your house. We have loved living over there. We have loved Hyde Park and the people who live there. Privacy is an issue. I think traffic could become an issue. Down where that big building, commercial building, is being built on Hyde Park Lane, I don't know who approved the zoning for that, but it is 2 feet off the street. And it's very difficult to get out onto Main Street because people park along there and you cannot see the traffic either way. And I fear someday that we are going to have a very serious accident there. I guess one of the questions I have, but I think maybe it's been answered here, is if it is commercially zoned as it is now, are there any restrictions within that zoning? And part of that is because of what happened down there on that other corner where that other building was built. We were led to understand it would be a commercial property, but it would be single story. The person who bought it is only using half of it. He built twice as much as what he needed, so he can rent half of it. And as I said, we have very narrow streets in there. They're private streets. And they go right along the edge of his property. There are 2 feet between that building and our road. My other question is, because we live on 550 West, which comes in through Hyde Park, is there any chance that road would ever be cut through into that area if it were residentially zoned? We're getting a lot of traffic through there right now, but partly because Mutton Hollow's been torn up. But there's a lot of traffic that's going through there, and we've had to put up traffic signs and things and ask them to please watch the speed. Someone once said to me, we see signs in subdivisions that said, slow down for our children. But over there, you slow down for these elderly people who are trying to walk down the street because there's not a sidewalk. We love it. We love being there. We moved there because that's what we wanted. And at the time we moved there, my husband was well and healthy. We didn't need a patio home. But shortly after that, he got cancer. And I don't know what we ever would have done had we not been there. And he passed away a few weeks ago. I guess it's mostly the privacy issue of having at least single-story homes there instead of 2-story. Thank you.
My name's Brian Stenquist. I live at 559 Creekside Lane. So it's actually my parents' house, but they're out of the country on a mission right now, so I'm house sitting it while I'm building another house. So I understand the need for being able to build housing, and but I've lived in that house, well, since I was 8 years old, since 1992, and I would love to just keep an open field there, but I know it's not realistic. Because my house, the west fence, the backyard faces this property. So the entire fence line of my dad's house is on that property line. And so, you know, if any house is going to have then, you know, people being able to look directly in. You know, ours is the closest to it and the most exposed to it. I'm not opposed to housing going in there, just I don't like the idea of the tall 3-story houses. And again, I'm a little indifferent to if it's commercial or residential, but I would think that there could be a compromise solution where you could put in a 2-story fourplex or a couple of duplexes or something, you know. Anyways, because yeah, the privacy is my main concern with that, so.
Bring the map up again, show the lot. Where it shows the lot, right there. All right, gentlemen, I'm Lauren Pitt. I live in that lot just to the south, the one that wants the zone change. It's zone commercial. That's my shop in the back of my house there. That I used to have a business in that I don't do anymore because I'm retired. But the houses that you see to the south of me that one of the gentlemen is talking about that they built, when they went for the zone change on those, they promised us it was going to be single-level houses. And when this, after the zone got changed and everything, the gal that did it sold it to another developer. And he came in and built these 3 large homes in there. And the one that's right next to my lot is, I would say, it's got to be taller than 35 feet. Because the basement sits 6 feet out of the ground, and then you got the tall house plus the roof. And they had to do that because of the water line coming to the house. They had to raise the whole house up to get the sewage to drain. And there's been water problems with those houses, as one of the neighbors said, to the old house out there because the road drains right onto their property. But either way, my thing is I want to just leave that zone commercial, my home zone commercial. I've lived there for 52 years. I was one of the original ones that signed to have our lots all zoned commercial. Because eventually I was able to use it to have my business there. And I think the city is unwise to give up any commercial zone property. If you know, it's very lean in Kaysville. You don't have much commercial zone areas left. And a lot of it that's left is out on our side of town, on the north side. I would think it'd be better to have this commercial along Main Street because it's accessible to businesses. If you want to put a business in, where would you put it? It'd be a lot better to have it on a main street where you could have a business. And I agree with some of the others. With a business, they come in, they go home at night. It's quiet. There's no traffic, there's no people, there's no parties going on, there's no disturbances, which we've had with problems with renters by us in the past, because it's a business and they have different restrictions for them. And that would keep the neighborhood, I think, a lot better for me anyway, because if I keep it commercial and the lots next to those are commercial, it's worth more if somebody wants to come in and buy a bigger piece of ground to build on. Now, when you talk about apartments, I've noticed the ones they're building down the street, that was already zoned residential before they tore the house down and built the apartments. But if you go down the street a little further onto Fort Lane, there's 2 great big huge apartment places going in. Right off the end of Fort Lane, you can see them going up. So there's no shortage of apartments going in around here. But I think that it would just be unwise for the city to give up commercial ground for residential when they need more. The city's going to grow. They need more places for businesses to come in, develop, and have a business. And so if you go and put it all into apartments and have nothing but apartments through here, where can businesses go? I've seen in some cases where businesses actually gone into some residential areas and had the zone changed to commercial so they could have a business in a house. I think that's over on Creekside. Not Creekside, but anyway. Crestwood Road. Yeah, on Crestwood Road over there. They did but anyway, I just think that the city should deny the zoning change, leave it commercial, let the city have a chance to grow commercially out on the north side of town, on Main Street, where businesses should be. That's what I asked the council to do, is deny the request for the zone change. Thank you.
My name is Emily Kramer, or Emily McDonald. I'm just going to go after Lauren because I second everything he said. I own the home, actually own the home next to Lauren as well as the Victorian next to that. So I just say what Lauren said.
Any others would like to comment? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. And we'll ask Mr. Bastion to come back up to the podium.
So, based off of a couple of the comments, one thing I heard was people were concerned about traffic going, and increased traffic and people pulling in and out of there. One thing I will say to that is if this were to stay commercial and a commercial building was built there, there is a 0-foot setback for commercial. So that means that, and I think one of the lady brought it up, your building can sit right next to the sidewalk. There is no setback. So that, an argument to that, what we're proposing, we're 25 feet back from the sidewalk. So it's definitely going to give a little more room for people to see people coming in and out of there. I know with a commercial building that would definitely be harder to see right next to the sidewalk coming in and out. If your commercial building was up front and the parking in the back, it can be a lot harder to see people coming in and out of there. And I do, so just to note as well, we do plan, if this were to go through, we planned on individual tax IDs for each unit. So I know some people have been worried about renters. We plan on selling these individually, so they would be individual tax IDs for every pad site. So we could sell these off individually instead of a whole community, or just keeping them as all rentals. So I think one of the ladies that got up wanted to know what work we had done in the last 5 years. We have done extensive work throughout Davis County and Weaver County. If you go into Farmington, we've done quite a few developments. Rice Farms, there's a big multifamily development, kind of duplexes, single-family homes. We're building like 4 apartment complexes right now in Ogden. We've got we have developed a lot of residential, just single-family home developments all throughout Kaysville, West Point, Syracuse. I mean, we're not a big box builder, but we probably build 30 to 40 homes a year. This is something we pride ourselves in quality. We definitely don't plan on building something that's going to bring down the neighborhood. But it's also going to be affordable for residents of Kaysville.
Will you speak to the height questions and the privacy questions?
Yeah. So these are, what's proposed is 2-story. These are 2-story buildings, so they're definitely going to be quite a bit below the 30-foot allotment that the city has. And as far as I'm not sure which, so the house is to the west, I would say, or to the east. The way this sits, I don't know if you want to pull it back up on the map. The plat map, so just our proposed site plan, I guess. So one gentleman mentioned 8-foot setback. It's actually not 8 feet. We can't be at 8 feet because we have so many units. So we would be at a minimum of 12 feet from the property line would be that side setback. And then if you look at where these are facing, these are actually facing north and south, not east and west. So there would be a few windows along the back where there will be bedrooms back there. And then the gentleman to the east of the property that came up, there really would be no windows or anything on the east side of the property as far as windows looking into their property. Yeah, so as far as height goes, I mean, we definitely, it wouldn't be feasible to build a 3-story building. We plan on keeping them at 2 stories. They're a lot more affordable. Going 3 stories makes it a lot more expensive, and we're trying to keep the cost down. So,
Are those 2-car garages?
that's a 1-car garage. So the way we figured out our parking is we'd have a garage for each one, which counts as 1 parking stall, and then 8 additional parking stalls as well. So a total of 16 parking spots. So basically one for every unit, so that there were enough for 8 visitor parking stalls. They're about 1750 square feet each unit. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms.
So does parking space 16, is that going to buffer between that house that's immediately
It
on
would,
the
yep,
east?
yep. So it would,
So
it would,
technically, you wouldn't be able to look quite as far down because you're
yep, yep,
further away.
exactly. In fact, the rear setback, I believe, is 15 feet. So the building couldn't be any closer than 15 feet from the rear. And you can see we're a little bit off of that line.
Did I see another layout where it's mirrored?
So we went through two different zones. There's an R4 zone and a RM zone. And the R4 zone, because of the way the code's written, we really got the same exact layout. We were just mirroring it. We wanted to see what it would look like with the driveways facing south the way they are right now, which would be more ideal for melting snow and whatnot this way. But versus if we were to go from R4 to RM, really there is no change in how many units. I don't think anyone's going to get 10 units on that. Based off of the layout, this is what we could get. And with R4, that's the maximum we could get as well, was 8 units. So.
And so the driving space on the south side would also buffer those homes on the south.
Exactly.
From a
Yep.
direct down, it would give quite a bit of space.
Yeah, I mean, you're 30, I think it's 31 feet from the property line from the buildings to the property on the south.
You already mentioned this, I think, a little bit, but how similar would these be, or are they really identical floor plans to what you're building just up the street?
This concept is identical, and the layouts of those are really nice layout. I mean, if the city wanted us to change something so that they didn't look identical, we wouldn't be opposed to that. But really, cost-wise and this would allow us to keep our price point down enough to make it affordable for people in Kaysville. Any other questions?
Is there anything you can do to protect the privacy of the property owner to the north?
To the north? I mean, we could put up an 8-foot vinyl fence, you know. I don't know if there's fencing there right now. And I believe that the city wouldn't allow any higher fencing than 8 feet, right?
It would go through.
Yeah, I mean, you have 12 feet there. We wouldn't be opposed to planting. I mean, because of the way this is set up, all the checkered lines there, that would be the open landscape.
Is that 8 feet?
It's 15. It's actually 12 feet. Sorry, 12 feet. So we're a little farther than the 8 feet because of the way the code's written. We have for additional units. We have to.
Can you put the parking on the north or the east end?
Yeah, so move the buildings.
Not looking right down into the Hammond's patio?
So move the building to that's farther east to the west.
Towards Main Street, leave the parking on the east end?
Yeah, we wouldn't be opposed to that. I mean, this was just the concept design. We definitely wouldn't be opposed to that. We would want to be as least impactful as possible.
How can you guarantee that would happen? The planning commission needs to consider that. They're just going to give you the opportunity to go wherever you want there once they start.
You're right, and I totally understand your point of view there.
Well, depending on whatever zoning, but it would still have to go through a site plan review process, so all of that would still have to be reviewed. This isn't reviewing the specific plan yet.
So it's kind of like intertwined, yeah.
Just approaching with the microphone so we can hear you.
First of all, it's up to the chair, but we need to be able to capture for the minutes who's
Yeah.
speaking so that we can reference
Yeah,
that.
if you're
Yeah,
going
again,
to
my
speak,
name is
please come
Linda
up to the
Earl.
podium. Yeah.
Again, my name's Linda Earl at 543 North Creekside Lane. And I appreciate everything that you've addressed. Some of the concerns for me weren't just privacy, right? It was some of our other resources. So trying to be a little bit, cooperative. Our first thing is like this gentleman, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but he really stated the same thing I feel like, that we've done our fair share. We really have done our fair share here. We're very concerned about our schools. So if we're really insistent on saying, this is gonna happen and we want this residential, is there any way we can make this like a senior residential? Less impact on some of the other concerns, social, as well as impact on our school, things like that. Because with the design that you have, there's not a lot of yard. You could do a lot of, you know, Utah style kind of things, planting to help with the water, xeriscaping, exactly. And I can certainly appreciate that. And again, trying to work and be a little bit compromising. So with that, and if you're, like you said, you're buffering those in, we're talking about privacy, you know, maybe putting trees along that back line. So the only other thing then would be maybe making like a 55-year older type of living that would still incorporate a lot of people that are needing housing for Utah. It's still hitting a demographic that is really short, but it would help with that impact that we have on the social and on our schools.
And I can totally understand where you're coming from. The hard part would be the size of the pad sites that we have there. I know in general, we've built 55 and older communities before, and most 55 and older communities are trying to avoid any type of stairs. So it would be, this site I don't think would be as great for that unless we were able to acquire more ground to make the sites bigger so we can avoid stairs. We're really gonna need the two stories to incorporate bedrooms into that, but I wish there was a way to, yeah. Any other questions?
I just wanted to get a clarification from you on, you said these will be platted. You're going to plat this as a subdivision?
Yes, so it'll be,
Okay.
we'll have to have an HOA, we'll have to have, that's the whole plan, yep.
Yeah.
Individual tax IDs.
Yeah, because because anything can be rented. Any one of our single-family homes can be rented.
Yep.
But these will be platted as townhomes. They may be rented, they may be sold, they
Yep.
may be sold one at a time.
The intent is
Okay.
to individual tax IDs so we can
Yeah.
sell them all off.
Yeah. Not that there would be anything wrong if they were all rentals,
bet,
because
yeah.
there's a ton of people out there that need a place to rent and are not ready to buy, can't buy,
But
don't have the
our
ability
intent
to.
would be to do individual tax IDs so that would help with that, you
Yeah.
know? And I would imagine the HOA, most HOAs, based off of financing, only allow a certain amount of rentals if they are going to allow, like FHA financing, for example. They will only allow a certain percentage of that community to be rentals, otherwise they disqualify themselves.
Yeah, and that's not really a city issue. I'm just concerned about that if the rezoning were to go through,
Yep.
there would be additional meetings in the future on the subdivision.
Yep.
On the conceptual subdivision, and that could be fleshed out at that time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I have a really naive question.
Okay.
But I'm just looking at this again, and could, like, Unit 8 be over where the other parking 14 and 15 are? Could you put additional parking on that one side, so an even bigger buffer?
Yep.
Then you've got quite a bit of space, and then if you did trees in the back, I think that,
It would, so if we slid the whole building down, that would work.
Right.
If we add more, if we were to do 5 buildings and then 3, that may change setbacks a little bit. But we definitely could slide the building down and add
and just put the parking
more
on the other
parking right
side.
over there. Yep, that wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think the privacy things could be addressed by, that's a great idea, and then, you know, you can't see my green arrow here. Maybe, so, you know, on this elevation, you can't see it very good, it's fading. This elevation, you know, you could not have as many windows or not have up second-story windows or something. Those privacy things could be addressed, but, you know, I think these are important questions. Certainly, they're important for the citizens.
Yep.
They are a little beyond the field of a rezone question, but they're still important and they're things to address, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're not going to have any more public comment, so, I mean, no, I mean, the public hearing is closed, so, yeah.
Mindy, I have a question. It says in here that the goal is 15% of the new housing to be more dense than single family. Where are we at on that number, getting close to that 15%? Are we halfway there with some of the new proposed stuff? Are we not even close?
I have no idea, but my guess would be not even close. I mean.
We've asked that question a number of times, and I'm not saying the staff is shirking their duty, but it's just it's an important question that I just think we've been focused on the general plan, and that's a Herculean effort. That's a question that I think we need an answer to that we just haven't had good data on yet. Yeah.
So to give maybe a bit of a longer answer to that, but I have not done any of the, just because I started in January, I haven't done any of the mandatory reporting on that. I have read through what was done last year. It's been long enough that I can't recall, but the requirements that the state has had on reporting on the moderate income housing it has been poorly done. They're revising that, and I hope that it'll be more meaningful. But there's I could get that to you, and you could see if you could make sense of it. But it's really, that's one of the complaints actually that the cities have had, is that the formatting and the data has just been really not very meaningful. So I wish I could answer that better, but if you look at Kaysville in general, we're by and large single family. The moderate income housing really is meant to be more towards even R16, the townhome type of style condos, twin homes. We do have several of those throughout the community, but there's not a lot of this in Kaysville.
Well, and I don't even think, this is a question for another day, of course. I think we need to answer it, but because I don't even think the way that home values have skyrocketed and wages have not kept a pace, I think the definition of moderate income housing was tied to income levels and some percentage of income levels, and then there was some formula to tie it to home values. In theory, we might have a fraction of 15% on some of that math.
This is a really complicated discussion, and I'm glad we're having it, because I think it begs another question, and that is, what is the percentage? And I don't know that you know this, because a lot of cities don't, but they should. They should know what their percentage is of single-family detached housing versus all other kinds. Because once you know that, then you can kind of get a feel for what kind of a community you really are. Because I would venture to say that Kaysville is by far the most overwhelmingly single-family detached community I've seen along the Wasatch Front for its size, the size of city that it is, around 30,000 people. I don't know of any city that's even close to being as overwhelmingly single-family. So when these comments come up at Planning Commission, I'm trying to listen from the perspective of somebody who's been here for, going on half my life now, raised my family here, although I don't think how long you've lived here really gives me any more skin in the game than somebody who's been here a year. It just doesn't. But I would say that I think a good rule of thumb is that in Utah, along the Wasatch Front, most communities are about 3 single-family homes to every attached home, every multiple family home. Now, that was the percentage that was in place for many, many years. I think that's probably changing. Wasatch Front Council, the Wasatch Front Regional Council, and Envision Utah have said that those percentages are starting to change, that over the next 10 to 15 to 20 years, what you'll see is that the housing mix will change from more of a 3-to-1 or 75% to 25% to more of a 60-40, because that's what the demand is. As we become less affordable, we're going to build less single-family detached homes, and we're going to build more of the attached homes because they simply will be more affordable. Now, talking about affordability, it gets really crazy. I hope I haven't confused anybody so far. Is that pretty obvious? 3-to-1, single family, most cities are around 3-to-1. Some cities are obviously not like that.
My statistics are we're a little less than 5%.
Your sense is we're about 5% multiple family?
I've researched this extensively. We're a little less than 5%.
Okay, thank you for that, because I worked for cities, and the cities that I worked for 3 different cities and a county, and overall that percentage is higher than 5, but around some cities a little more, some cities less. But that's a pretty good ballpark figure. So in these discussions about we've got a ton of this in certain areas, I'd certainly agree that you do. But from my perspective as a homeowner here in Kaysville, I'm a weird animal because I live on the west side. I built my home on the west side. I was very concerned about Legacy Highway because there are 6 different proposals where Legacy was going to go through my neighborhood and kill it. We built anyway. We just felt like we wanted to be there. We thought about it. I called the Farmington planner. I called the city manager for Kaysville. I tried to check out every possibility of whether or not my investment was going to be good. And all I could get was good guesses, because those guys would say to me, we can't tell you for sure. We don't know everything that's coming. But I would say that are we for discussion on the item?
Yeah.
Okay, if it just give me a couple more minutes, I will just say that from my perspective, I see that this really complies with our general plan, as painful as that may be, and even with the good input that you've given us, I do believe that this is a good proposal. And I've got 11 different talking points on that, but I'm not going to read through all of those. I will just say that there's an axiom in planning that where you have density, you add a little density. That you want to create synergy where you already have density, you want to add a little bit more. Main Street is ideal for that. And while your neighborhood may have more of that than you feel is justified, that's really the fault of the city fathers before you. When I built my home in West Kaysville, I alienated a bunch of my neighbors when a subdivision wanted to come in next to me. And I said, you could put apartments behind me. It's not going to bother me. If they're built right and they're screened right, I'm okay with it. And for 25 years, I've been talking to Kaysville City as somebody who's got an interest in this and worked in government to say, hey, we have an imbalance. You've created nirvana on the west side for everybody with these huge lots, and you're putting all of your multiple family on the east side, and you really don't have enough commercial. So the points you've made tonight are very, very good. We should keep all the commercial ground we can. But having said that, I think that piece is really marginal for commercial. Just on my many years of experience, it's very marginal for commercial. And you don't always know that commercial is going to go home at 6 o'clock, that there won't be people working upstairs. I've seen that argument before, and it often fails. And you don't often know the type of commercial that's going to come in, what they're going to sell, what they're going to do. There could be people banging the back, doing some repair. So you have to be careful about that argument. Residential produces less traffic than commercial does. And if I looking at this map and having driven by this a million times, I look at this and I go, I think this is pretty much a low impact use. It's a fairly low impact use where I think it's better. I would rather have residential next door to me than commercial. I really would. But again, I'm an odd duck. I've got neighbors who still think I'm crazy because I thought apartments on the west side would be okay. And I've told the administration for over 20 years, we need to have commercial on the west side. We need to have more than just large lot single family. That's crazy that everybody on the east. Exactly. Exactly. It is imbalanced. It's imbalanced, and that's not your fault. But I will say this, there's the tyranny of geography. The tyranny of geography is that you have Main Street within a few hundred feet of your homes. So when you moved there, you moved to the problem. Whether you like it or not, you did move to the problem. I moved to the Legacy West Davis problem. I'm now going to have 2 interchanges, one in my front yard and one in my backyard. I'm going to have an enormous amount of traffic that goes through my neighborhood. My neighborhood went from 6 homes on a dead-end street to over 200 homes. I now have probably 2,000% the traffic in front of my home than I had for 8 years. And it's only going to get worse, and yet I knew change was going to come, change would happen. So, and I've got a home down at the end of my street that I would challenge any of you to come look at and say that that's a good use.
We understand your perspective.
You live out in Southwest? Yeah, yeah. I'm saying change happens.
I've lived in that area for 20 years, and the amount of commercial that's been changed to residential is amazing. And so you're like, hey, it's a city father's problem, but you're compounding the problem over and over with the not in my backyard, because I'm a rich white guy on the west side.
Well, what I would say is that you need to talk to the city council and say, you have planning commissioners, one in particular, who said for years and years and wasn't listened to, that you ought to be having commercial on the west side. There's nothing there. My kids couldn't ride, the nearest park, my kids had to ride a bike either over Burton Lane overpass or Shepherd Lane overpass.
We've talked to them, we've done petitions.
Nope.
We've done everything. In the city council, the planning commission, every time. We live over on the west side mostly. You guys, we don't live over there. We're going to put it where we don't live.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's going to take people running for office and making those changes. And you have a council member here tonight. But again, having read the staff report, which I thought was spot on, the staff report, just from an objective viewpoint, was very well done. This complies with the general plan. This is not a bad use. And I can't find an argument from my perspective as a planning commissioner to recommend no. So I've said enough, but my vote on this is going to be to recommend approval for it, as much as it may pain some of you, because I'm looking at the overall picture and I just see that, this is a justified use based on our plan and based on what we need to do going forward. We're not an island. We're not an island. We can't be an island.
So Paul, I'm feeling really torn, and I'm very inexperienced, so please give me some leeway. I'm feeling torn because commercial also fits with the general plan. So I think that's something to consider. I maybe have a bias because I lived on Creekside Way for 10 years before I moved to the west. And there's definitely a difference in the schools, in the neighborhoods, in the community. So I'm leaning a little bit more towards, I think the houses are beautiful. I think if this goes in that direction with the townhouses, I would say come, fight, make sure that you get all of your accommodations accounted for when they do platting. You have a say, push for your say for privacy if it goes that direction. But I'm honestly torn because they have a ton of dense housing over there compared to the rest of Kaysville. And maybe we should diversify, spread the wealth a little bit. We have areas to do that in the general plan that are zoned and planned for that. So why cram more in? I'm sorry, I lived there, I felt the difference.
Yep.
So I'm a little sympathetic.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not unsympathetic at all.
So,
I'm just
the commercial also fits our future general plan.
not
for
as
Main
well as the
Street.
residential does, though. Clearly not as well as the residential. And commercial on that side of the street is not as appropriate as it is on the west side of the street.
Well, I don't know, Paul. I mean, I think I'd be with the comment. I think that this is on the plan. Like, if you look at the plan that is going to be approved, this is zone commercial along the street. I mean, and it shows like high density housing where the commercial is. So, I mean, really, you need to preserve that going forward, or there's not going to be any commercial in that area.
Or lean towards mixed use.
Yeah.
Well, so that's why I guess I kind of straddle where the two of you are at or the three of you are at. Well, I talked about the plan, and you all have talked about the plan. The plan really calls for this area to be mixed use. And it's zoned commercial currently. I really feel that we're in a housing crisis in this state. We need more housing. There's no question about it. I really do wind up supporting, whatever proposals that we do get that would increase the housing that we have. And as Tom indicated, we are very low in this city with regard to the number of higher density housing, multi-family attached housing compared to most other communities along the Wasatch Front. And so from that standpoint, I feel like we could do more to address the issue that we face generally here. But a way that I think that we can address this and be consistent with the plan and accomplish a lot of these things is we just recently, not too long ago, adopted a mixed use overlay. And so from that standpoint, I would look at this and say, rather than rezone away from commercial to residential, put the mixed-use overlay over this area, which allows for residential units to be built within the commercial zone. And so I kind of see that as a way to address all of those issues and kind of be consistent with what the plan is saying, which really calls for this for being a mixed-use area. And so that's kind of where I'm leaning or coming down on, landing on this.
Do we need to explain what mixed use is, do you think?
Well, mixed use is really just the idea that it's, it's mixing residential and commercial, essentially. Kind of the older concept where you used to have things like a store on the ground floor and apartments or housing above, or you mix it sometimes where you have like a corner grocery store in a neighborhood with other housing around it or something like that. But it's not strictly segregated zoning where you only have residential here and only have commercial over there. Mixed use allows for a more dynamic, vital neighborhood and community. And so that was something that we considered long and hard as we did the general plan update. Many other communities along the Wasatch Front and around the country have been looking at that and going that way. And we are looking at doing that as well with our general plan that's hopefully about to be adopted.
And to put a fine point on what Will explained, mixed use allows two uses on one parcel.
Right.
Right now, before we adopted that,
it's separate.
That was non-existent in Kaysville. You had to have one use on one parcel. Commercial, residential, industrial, whatever it was only one use on one parcel. Mixed use allows two uses, retail and residential, commercial, residential, whatever, on one single parcel. And yeah, I mean, the one comment I would say to the citizens is, I think there's no arguing that it's objective. It's an objective reality that this has more units per whatever unit of measurement we want to put, acre, let's say, than other areas of Kaysville. I think that is, if someone wants to dispute that, I think they're going to be wrong, objectively by the math. Here's the thing, though, when we just went through the general plan process, so what you saw on the screen earlier was from our 2019 general plan. We have been going through, we as the city have been going through updating and revising the general plan and really wholesale revamping of the general plan over the last 2 years. I mean, you'd almost started in 2019. And okay, so here we go. So here, well, and before I get to this, it started, I think, in 2019. It really went ramped up in 2020. We were seeking citizen input. We had a number of meetings here at City Hall. We wanted citizen input. Well, because of COVID, we didn't get a lot.
Yeah.
People didn't show up, understandably. We just didn't get a lot of input. So we said, this body, in addition to the city council, said we need more input. And so if we're going to get more input, let's get like really good input. And we got a statistically valid survey. The city paid for a statistically valid survey. And there's a map similar to the one that's on the screen right now that shows all the respondents who gave input on that survey. And it's spread literally throughout the city. It is statistically valid. If you can go Google, that's a term of art. There's a specific definition to what that means.
And it was a pretty good sampling. I mean,
we got a good sampling.
We got a pretty good number.
It wasn't just from the east side, west side, whatever, right? It was a sampling. And so what the city then did, the city has hired a consultant that's been going through this whole process, whose job it is to create general plans, to help cities create general plans. And that consultant then took the data and created things like this map. And this map was not driven by the elected officials or necessarily by the planning commissioners. We certainly had a lot of input, and so did the elected officials. But the idea was, we want to know what the citizens want. And this map is a reflection, is as the best that the consultant and the planning commission and the city council can determine is a reflection of what the citizens wanted. So with that background, you look at this area where we're at, the broader area around Main Street, where Bowman's is, where kind of the retail core is, where this property is mixed use, commercial, residential. So that in that respect, this area is going to change over the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And it's going to change to be more mixed use. It's going to have residential incorporated. That's what the citizens wanted. And what they didn't want, and again, you can disagree with what I'm saying, but I think I'm trying my best to give you an objective view of how the general plan came about. What the citizens didn't want was putting mixed use or multifamily all throughout the city. They decided we want it here. That was not us saying that, the city per se, the planning commissioners or the city council. It was us trying to respond to what the statistically valid survey of citizens from the whole of Kaysville said. And if you want this map that I'm talking about so you can really verify me, don't take my word for it. You can ask me, or you can ask Melinda or Mindy, whoever from the city. We can give you all the data to chew on you want, and you can see what I'm saying I think is accurate. So
it's all online.
It's all online. You can go find it. We could help you get there. And the point, I guess, of all this is this area. Well, let me see before I say that. This plan has not been adopted yet. That is a fact. But in my mind, it's like if we are, in my personal opinion, if we are making decisions off of what is technically the still current general plan, but in my mind, it's the old general plan. It's operating on old data and old opinions. I'm pretty sure this plan is not going to change. It's just a matter of getting it approved from the city council. It's off of our plate. It's on to the city council. I don't know what they've done with it or what they're doing with it. But they're not going to wholesale change it. I'm pretty confident in saying that. It's not a certain thing, but I'm pretty confident in saying that. So given that it's not going to change, this is what we should be basing our decisions off of, in my opinion. And this says a mix of commercial and residential. So drilling down now to this particular project, for me, I kind of would like to see the mix of uses on one property. That's what I think we were trying to accomplish with this mixed use area around Main Street and 200 North. So I almost lean towards, maybe the developer probably doesn't want to do this, and it's their prerogative to do what they want to do. But it's like if they would have waited to get this general plan adopted and then came with this, our hands would have been not totally tied, because this is a guiding document. This is not a mandatory document, but it would have been an easier case for them to make, I think. So anyway, that leads me to say I would rather it be truly something mixed use as opposed to just straight residentials, but I'm really on the fence. I'm not going to say slam dunk, I think it should be recommended approval, and I'm not going to say slam dunk, it should be recommended denial. I think if I had to give a plus factor at this point, I would say probably recommend denial, in my opinion. Not because I think this is bad, but because I think once the general plan gets adopted, I'd like to see what sort of a mixed use concept or idea would come before us.
And I pretty much echo what Josh is saying.
Can I ask a question about mixed use? It sounds like you're talking about putting a business on the bottom floor and an apartment complex on the top. So that would be higher density housing than what we're even discussing tonight.
No, it would still be limited. I mean, you're limited in what you can do on the property based on the size of the property. So what it probably means is fewer residential units, but some business mixed in with it.
For example, you could...
There's no density limitation in the mixed use.
That's
though.
true. That's true.
the thing with mixed use is a lot of people don't understand it. But mixed use doesn't just mean two different uses on the same property. It can mean two different uses in the same building. And where Utah is struggling with mixed use, unlike other parts of the country, is putting commercial and residential in the same building. Okay? That is what true mixed use is when you have residential or office above restaurant or retail. And banks have struggled with the idea of, well, how do we finance that? But in a true mixed-use center, which you'll see a few of them on the Wasatch Front, you are starting to now see commercial, retail, restaurant on the bottom, or even office with residential above. And that's really a desirable land use. Not for most of us who've not experienced that, but if you've traveled anywhere, you see this everywhere. You see this in other big cities. Where you struggle with an efficiency of land use, sorry? I was just trying to say that in Utah, we're going to be moving more and more toward the mixed use in the same building because we simply don't have an endless amount of land. Our geography is different than most places, and we are already the 8th most urbanized state in the nation. The 8th most urban. A lot of people don't believe that, but if our population, our entire 90% of our population is on less than 1% of the area of the state of Utah. So we're highly urbanized. So the problem I see it is that we don't want apartments and we don't want a lot of higher density because we say, well, we're rural. Well, we're not rural anymore. We're not rural anymore. And the sooner we face that, we've got to put people where the water is, where the roads are, where the businesses are, can't continue to sprawl out. And that's the way I see it. And so I love the idea that that's been brought up about mixed use because I've worked with it. But I think this property alone is going to be very difficult to do mixed use on unless you were to do a small office in the front and then have a couple, 3 residential units in the back. Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I just don't know a lot of people who have the courage to actually try and do that. The property's narrow. It could be difficult to do that. So the real problem with mixed use is assemblage of land. So the woman that was here earlier and spoke, she's got the 2 properties to the south. If you could put those properties all together, you could do a dynamite mixed use little center there that would be quite attractive. But it takes partnerships and it takes a lot of time. So from my perspective, as a planning commissioner, based on this proposal, I see the suggestion as mixed use as simply kicking it down. We're just kicking the can down the street. We're just kicking it down. We're just delaying. We need to take action, not by artificially saying, well, let's wait and let's do this and let's try to assemble some land. Mixed use is going to be very difficult to do on 2/3 of an acre because it's so narrow.
Mine is mixed use. Mine is a residential in the front, the shop in the back. That's what it is. It has been ever since I built the building. Residential in the front, shop in the back, access to fire.
Yep. That's how our cities were prior to World War II.
Or what about housing with a small gym? I don't know. We saw a lot of that in Ireland.
You're only limited by your imagination and financing.
And then the residents could use it.
Mixed use is great. Wilf and I have worked with it, so.
I resonate with what you're saying, but now the state is requiring a certain amount of denser housing. We don't have a choice. So I think it's important that you're making your voices heard so that we can try to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
I'm glad that you're here.
I think that is like, I mean, living in that area, I think that's where you probably would want to consider that they already have the majority. That the 5% that Tom referenced, probably 90% of that is in that area. Okay, so I mean that's the argument we're hearing here is that we've done our share. So I mean, just to use the argument that we got to meet the 15, why aren't other areas in the city participating? You know, that's the challenge.
Well, I'll tell you one reason, and that is it's already been locked up in large lot residential, which was absolutely boneheaded idea to begin with. I was 36 when I bought my 1/2 acre lot and built a big rambler on it. So did my neighbors. My back and my health were a lot healthier back then. Now I'm an empty nester. That 1/2 acre is like an anvil tied to me. I have to pay my neighbor kids to go out and help me trim and mow. I mean, there's an old saying that's really true, and that is when you have large lot residential like this, it's too big to plow and too small to plow and too big to mow. It's a pain. Large lot residential, which we have stuck to doggedly in West Kaysville, has determined our stripes. We're a zebra. Our stripes can't change much. It's all infill development now. How much raw ground, Melinda, do we really have left in Kaysville?
Less than 300 acres.
Wow. And how many square miles of city do we have?
10.
10 square miles of city, and we have less than 300 acres of raw ground left. But not a lot of opportunity to change our stripes.
It's not going to change much.
No, I mean,
It's
even
not.
if all 300 of those acres were developed as multifamily, it still would be 90%, 85% single family.
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay. Well,
that's why I'm saying I think we need to act now. Missing middle housing, this type of housing is called the missing middle. And that's either apartments or you have large lot single family. Anything in between, like townhomes, flex units, flag lots, that's what a lot of the public wants, but the cities aren't allowing it to be built.
Okay. Well, I mean, is there any more discussion or debate, or, I mean, are we ready to make, someone ready to make a motion?
We're trying to listen, we're torn.
I think we all can see, like I said, I was trying to make compromises on things. I mean, I don't think we're unrealistic. And I certainly appreciate that need for housing. I raised my kids as a single parent. I'm single now. I totally get that. I'm not saying that. I don't think anybody there is here. But again, we're worried about our school. I think that's a huge thing. We're worried about the challenges that we've been facing in our schools. And I think that we're just really worried about the burden that one particular area is carrying for the entire city.
Okay. Yeah, I think we definitely have heard your comments, so I think I would entertain a motion.
I made the other two.
So it may, this is off topic, but it may please both the council and the commission to know that we do have an application for property over on Flint Street to come in with a mixed-use project and 87 dwelling units on 6 acres. So, you know, we don't control when we get these applications in, but.
Let me know when that meeting is. I want to be gone.
We're working on a development agreement.
Where, can you say where that one's going to be, Melinda?
Yeah, it's, so we'll be taking the next couple months to work out a development agreement because mixed use requires a development agreement. So it won't come before, I don't know the date it'll come before the Planning Commission. Could be September, could be early October, but it's the property directly north of Smith's.
On Flint Street?
On Flint Street, yes.
Okay.
How many units on how many acres?
It's just over 6 and it's 87, plus the square footage of the office and retail commercial.
I mean,
sure.
to my point earlier, that's right here. See this is mixed use, that color, because that's what the information, the data we gathered said. Citizens wanted to see that here, and they wanted to see it here. They didn't want to see it here. So this is not a map driven by elected officials' agendas. This is a map with input from elected officials and appointed officials driven by citizen-gathered agenda or data. So,
Was that not in my neighborhood map?
No. No. Well, so, I mean, so if that's a legitimate question, I'll give you my legitimate answer. I wish we had the map that showed you all the little pinpoints of all the households that responded to this survey, saying essentially, I mean, it was a lot of questions, but what do you want Kaysville to look like? Where do you want housing to go? Where do you want commercial to go? There was all these things. And that map was representative of the entire city. It wasn't that the responses weren't concentrated in one area or the other. And so my opinion is, the way I interpret that is, it wasn't not in my backyard. It was literally the whole swath of the city saying, this is how we want our city to look. There it is. Okay. All those dots are households who responded to the survey. Look at, there's a lot of dots that responded to the survey over in this area.
That's because there's so many houses in that area already.
Yeah, well, that goes to my point earlier. That's an objective reality.
But it was also analyzed by neighborhood as well, or by area of the city.
So, will you interpret that for us, Melinda? What was it you're just showing us?
Just
no? Sorry.
That was a scatter map of the...
Well, but there was a question even on that one page. It even said, like, where do you want things or something? Anyway, maybe we don't. Where would you most like to see change occur? A is this area. B is secondary area. C is her third. This is citizen input from all those dots. Every one of those dots represents a household of someone who picked up the phone or gave online information or some response.
Well, I responded to that survey, but I never envisioned that you would change commercial to residential on things.
Yeah.
That just didn't come up in the survey.
Yeah, Josh, at the bottom of the map, it actually said, keep commercial on 200 north, and then it disappeared. Can you pop the map back up?
Yeah, hold on.
And while she's doing that, I'll say, this is online, and I don't know how many pages this portion of the data is, but it's probably many dozens or maybe over 100. So, there's a lot of data any one of you can go and chew on. And by the way, you can bring your analysis of that data to City Council when they make the decision on this. And I mean, speaking for myself, when someone comes having done their homework with data and not so much emotion, your emotion can inform the data, no doubt, and your argument based on the data. But a data-based argument is way more persuasive than someone who says, I think traffic's going to be a lot higher here. Well, I don't know. I'm just holding my finger in the wind, and I think it's going to be more traffic. If you don't have data, that's not as persuasive as you saying, I looked at the percentages of responses in the general plan data, and the citizens don't want X in the area of Y, or whatever. That's a very persuasive argument. So bring all that to the City Council with you.
We need a little time, like I said, there were those that did a little bit of research, but because of the time of people trying to sit in their vacations before the end of the year, they weren't here, and I don't have access to their research. So I can appreciate your comment on that.
I've tried, Josh. I've done bullet points from the master plan. I've done everything. Now I just go by my emotion, because why waste my time doing all the research and just ignore it?
Well, I, for one, could not agree more than with what he said. And that is, having listened to thousands and thousands of public hearings over the years, the ones where people come in with not only logic, but with facts and statistics to back it up, are the ones that have the best chance of winning the day. Because emotion-based decisions are, to a great extent, of what has got us to this point right now, which is a mess. Because how many of us were at the public meeting when the future of our home was decided? I didn't go to the public hearings for my subdivision, but I sure hope that the people who came out and spoke at that public hearing for my future home were positive and not all negative. I sure hate to think that the people I go to church with and I see all the time in my neighborhood weren't the ones who said, no, I don't want those people to come in. No, no, no. You know, there's that to think about. The people who may end up living on this property next door to you, let's say it goes to residential, they want to be welcomed. They want to feel like they're a part of the community, because the reason they come to live there is because this is a great place to be and because they need a place to live. The problem we have in our state right now is we don't have enough places for people to live. Even with all the massive multiple family projects you see being built all over the place, we're still short approximately 30,000 apartments on the Wasatch Front. 30,000. We've made a dent. It used to be 40 to 50. We still have a long way to go. But I know that when, you know, I was young and I needed a place to live, there was hardly any place to live. I was a college student. I had to go knocking door to door in Provo to find a place to live as a college student, because there weren't enough places to live. And yet I had to live where the university told me I had to live, in their approved housing. Man, I'm telling you, you talk about stress. There are more people with stress now living in basements, living illegally, people living in storage units, because there aren't enough places to live. And it's not single family homes they're looking for. They're just looking for a decent place to live, clean and safe.
Well, I'm ready to bring this to a head maybe and make a motion, and then see where it goes.
I think we're at that point. The one thing I'll say, just to manage everyone's expectations, in case anyone was wondering, I think this back and forth is helpful and good, but it's not going to happen at City Council. So enjoy it while it lasts. We usually don't even do it very much, but we don't have very many people here, so I think it's worth doing.
Come on, Abby, you can do something.
Yeah.
And it was great to hear from you.
They're a lot more formal, you know, but anyway, just FYI.
So let me preface my motion and go back a little bit to some of the comments I made earlier, which are that as I look at the general plan, this area being designated for mixed use. Mixed use can be accomplished with the zoning that currently exists. It would allow for residential. I fully support the need and the priority to build additional residential in the city, and I think that can be accomplished with our mixed use overlay zone. So and I understand, of course, the applicant has asked for a rezone to residential. I'm not asking him at this point to consider changing that here because he has an application before us. That's maybe something that the council may undertake. So with that as my explanation, I would make a motion that we recommend to the City Council a denial of the request to rezone this property from the CG commercial zone to the RM residential mixed zone. I'm sorry, it's the RM zone.
Residential multiple family.
And with the basis for mine is that I would say that this area would be better served by having the mixed-use overlay placed upon the commercial zoning that is currently in place, which would then also allow for residential uses to be mixed in with the commercial that could be built there.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion for denial from Commissioner Summercorn and a second from Commissioner Sunloff. I will start the voting. Aye.
No.
Aye.
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 Okay, so the ayes have it. The motion passes for denial, or recommendation of denial.
And understand, this is a recommendation. It's really, the decision is up to the council.
But stay involved. If you want to protect your privacy and stuff, accommodations could be made, but you have to voice that when it comes to platting, if it goes that direction.
Thanks, everybody. You've been very accommodating. Yeah, you've been very accommodating. Thank you for letting me have more brief conversation with our life. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. So we'll go on to item number 7, discussion of the general plan amendments and rezone applications.
Sorry, you moved on to the, hold on. Yeah, so anticipating, and to answer Wilf's question, we have on the action agenda next week, I'm working on the staff report right now, but to adopt the general plan.
By the council?
Yes, yeah. So hopefully that happens. I spent most of the day working on the general plan, adding in the edits they requested, and we'll bring that to them next Thursday, and I would anticipate that it would finally be adopted. Hence the reason for the discussion. So one thing, I mean, I'll speak candidly, but I think that Kaysville's general plans in the past have been very weak, and a very difficult tool to use because of that weakness. So that said, also the previous general plans have never had a future land use map that really kind of shows what the use of the land should be. We've always had, of course, we have to have the zoning map. So anticipating the adoption and knowing that we're still going to continue to have rezone applications, what do we do when they come in and those rezone applications are not in line with what the general plan future land use map says it should be? Do we require a general plan amendment? My experience with the communities I've worked in, that's been the process that they've had. So you could process them concurrently, but essentially you would have two applications, a general plan amendment and the rezone. You don't have to do that. There's nothing that says you have to do that. It would be keeping things streamlined so that you are honoring that general plan. It's double the amount of public hearings, double the staff reports, but it I think allows you to stay more true to the process that you went through to get to a general plan and a future land use map. So I just, and knowing that we have some planning commissioners on the commission that have had experience with both scenarios, I thought it'd be good to just have a discussion, get some guidance from the Planning Commission and to which direction we would go. If we do want to go in the direction of having a general plan amendment, I think we need to get an ordinance, a text amendment before you to codify what that process looks like. We'll need to, I mean, they'd be a very simple thing, but it would probably mirror exactly what happens with a plan or with a zone change. It would be a public hearing at Planning Commission. I don't envision that the City Council would want to have a planning or a public hearing at their meeting. If they've chosen not to do that with the general plan that we are about to adopt, they have not done that with the zone changes. So I think it would be the same process as what the zone changes, but just wanted to get some thoughts and preference from the commission on what route to go, and then staff will work on an ordinance and bring that back to you for recommendation of approval, and then take it to City Council.
Who wants to go first?
Well, I've worked for communities that both ways. Ones that require a general plan amendment before they process a rezone if the rezone request is different from the general plan, and those that do not. And I'm a planner, so my perspective, I kind of have a perspective there, and the perspective is be true to your plan. Why go through the effort of doing a plan if you're not going to try to at least adhere to it? It kind of causes the public to lose faith in your plan if you adopt a plan and then you don't necessarily stick to it. And so if you're going to consider a zoning application that would be different from what the plan says, then consider changing your plan so that you're still consistent. So I would favor that, personally.
My take is, my view of a general plan is, it's as we've already kind of talked to some extent tonight, as the term implies. It's general. It's every several years. It takes a lot of citizen input, a lot of effort, and it's a very general, high level, this is what we want things to look like. My opinion is if you allow or require map amendments to the general plan in conjunction with rezone amendments, then the general plan map is essentially the zoning map 2.0. And it's not intended for that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think what it is intended for, let's use this one for tonight, that whole mixed use area along Main and 200 North. How I view it is that general plan says the presumption is most of the applications that come in should be rezones, should be rezoned as mixed use. The exception to that rule might be something different, but close and maybe meeting the spirit of the general plan or whatever, but it's not, exactly mixed use. So those would be exceptions to the rule of what the general plan map is showing. I don't think you have to change the general plan because then that just, that makes the general plan less of a guiding document. It's not meant to be a zoning map. So it's just meant to be general, and then there's exceptions that might go different from it, is what I'm saying.
So having just argued one way, now I'm going to argue the other way.
Okay.
But Josh raises a really good point, which is, when you do a general plan amendment like we just done, and you've talked about it pretty extensively tonight, all of the public input that went into this and all of the effort to reach out to the public and get that. And that's what we're now about to adopt as our general plan. When you do a rezone, typically who do you get? You get the people that live right around it.
Yep.
And that's about it.
Yep.
And so if that's all the input you're going to get, it's going to be the same if you're going to amend the plan for that rezone.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't have the broader community input in that overall. So you raise a really good point, Josh, and I think I can see that as well.
Yeah. Melinda asked me this question, that same question, a few weeks ago, or you called me up and we had a chat about it. And so you can tell them what I said, but basically what I said was what Josh said is that, look, the general plan is by design a guiding document, not a regulating document. Mm-hmm. The zone regulates. The zone is the law. You have to follow the zone. And so if every time you're going to consider a zone change and it doesn't perfectly follow the general plan, then we've just become like states that require all rezonings to follow the general plan. And most states don't. There are only a handful of states that require that. Why is that? Because they want local officials to have the ability to use their common sense and their judgment. So the general plan is a guiding document, but it's like the blueprint on a house. If you can't move a wall around or you can't move something small within that without going back through and redoing the blueprints, well, that's a pain. So in my opinion, you don't need to go, I just think it's redundant. It's redundant to have any zone change that doesn't perfectly follow the general plan map, to have to go through and run them together, because you're just going to have multiple arguments. The arguments are just going to overlap each other. Which one's more important? What is more important? Is it the zone or is it the plan?
Well, as it says in the scriptures, almost thou persuadest me. No, I think I agree with that viewpoint.
The key part of all this, though, is if ultimately the elected officials recognize the importance of a general plan, and that should be the presumption that they are approaching rezone questions. What does the general plan say, and does this fit that? If it's yes, then you should probably rezone it in line with the general plan. If they're on board with that, then it all works. But if they're just like, general plan, it's guiding, we don't have to follow that. We can do something totally against the spirit of it, the spirit of the law there. That doesn't work.
Right. And I'm a little concerned about that.
Sometimes it does.
That's sometimes.
Let me give you some examples. What you said is mostly true. But every once in a while, somebody comes up with a land use proposal that everybody loves and everybody wants. It's not allowed. There's no zone for it. It's not in the general plan. All the brilliant thinking and all the momentum comes to a grinding halt. I went through this with a community. Sometime when you've got half an hour, I'll explain it to you.
Didn't you?
I sure did. We flew people to the West Coast. We flew our planning commission, our council, a bunch of residents. We flew, and we went out and we looked at cool mixed-use projects. We got funding from the state. We had this cool idea. But because it wasn't in the general plan, we didn't have a zone for it. All it took was a few neighbors to come out and go, this is BS, this is communism, we don't, you know. And all of a sudden, all those people who were so excited on the airplane coming back were, everybody chickened out. Yeah. Everybody chickened out except for a few of us, and I'm one of those, I didn't chicken out. I was amazed at how we just turned tail and ran because a few people said, well, I'm not familiar with this. Where is this being practiced somewhere else in the state? And there it wasn't. It would have been the first really cool mixed-use town center. So there's that argument to consider is what happens when you've got a really great idea? You just shut it all down? Because what happens? That developer, that person then goes, well, this isn't a community I want to develop in. No. Well, okay, never mind. I'll take my money and I'll go somewhere else. And then what you've lost out on is the years or decades you would have had a great use in your community because you had the courage to just do it instead of having to have everything so perfectly hand in glove.
So another thing too is that oftentimes people get hung up on that the general plan is this, but the general plan is more than just the future land use map, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so as like
it's
one
really
thing,
more the written.
it's the goals and the objectives.
Yeah,
so I'm really
by far.
excited to be able to actually have goals and objectives to refer to rather than just statements that would say, look, does changing this to residential from commercial, does it fit within the goals and the objectives? And, you know, so even though the future land use map is a very large piece of it, and it's oftentimes the most easy piece to refer to because it's easy to understand, right? Getting into the goals and the objectives is really where the meat and potatoes of the general plan is.
And that's why I was so torn with tonight's discussion, is it could go either way.
Yeah.
Objective 1.1, preserve single-family and objective 2, create a city center.
Yeah.
In this particular case,
Yeah, that's, you're absolutely right.
Either way, that's why I threw mixed use in there. I wasn't trying to kick the can down the road, but I was like, there's got to be some negotiation.
I honestly, I was really struggling with this rezone, you know, leading up to this meeting, because I really am supportive of adding housing. I really think we need to add housing to the community.
I do think we kind of can spread it out. I think we should.
But as I looked at the plan, the general plan, and, you know, it called for mixed use, and I thought, well, okay, but rezoning it residential, and then that would be mixed use in the area, but I thought, but that's just strictly residential. And then I thought about the overlay zone, and I thought, you know, the mixed use overlay, and I thought, oh, well, and that's what the plan calls for. And then I thought, well, the mixed overlay zone, even if it is zone commercial, will still allow for residential.
Sure.
That kind of accomplishes what we're hoping for, I think. So that's why I went the direction I did.
Here's a counterpoint, because I voted the other way.
Yeah.
And that is, the message that got sent to this applicant
I know.
is, I'm being punished
I know.
for bad decisions made earlier.
I watched the way he left, and I thought he was not happy, and I thought, yeah, and I feel bad for that, because I think he's great proposing a residential project like that. I think he can accomplish it another way. I hope he considers that.
But I think it's an undue burden on this applicant for a straightforward proposal to have to assemble property or wait or go back and redo their proposal when the need is here. The need is now.
But he's
There's no need to wait.
If you want to have a cool mixed use on Main Street though, we got to have like a vision or it's not going to happen.
Well, you have to have land, and that's what you don't have.
Well,
I worked in a community where we did a downtown mixed-use center. We also happened to have about 11 acres of land to work with as a city. That was a catalyst. Here, you can do on on about 2 acres, you can do a really cool little mixed-use building if you do underground parking. But you need an assemblage of land, and so that puts a burden on them to have to go like, well, why is it on me? Because the city didn't ever build anything on the west side. That's what you're gonna do with every person who comes in here, like the rezone that got denied down here on Main Street for the townhomes. That was the most open and shut case of this is justified. You look at the land uses around it. That was needed, it fit in, and I knew a lot of those neighbors that came out, and I was quite surprised. I was quite disappointed at how vociferous the opposition to that was. Like the world is gonna end because we're gonna have 6 or 8 townhomes on a half acre that's just a weed, it's a weed lot now. Come on. We have to be careful not to artificially delay what should naturally happen.
Well, but by the same token though, Paul, somebody's gotta, if you want a good mixed-use project, somebody's gotta go and assemble that land. And if we keep approving piecemeal projects, we're not gonna get land assembly.
Yeah, but you tell me where most mixed-use development happens, it's in an RDA area.
Oh, sure.
And it usually requires some big, deeper pockets to actually do it.
Melinda, we're looking at an RDA area, right?
Yeah, but it's not gonna generate much money.
And that's the problem.
And, and I mean, and you talk about structured parking or underground parking.
Oh, yeah, that's.
People aren't gonna.
It's $30,000 per stall.
No,
It's
that's.
35. It's,
35?
I mean, developers
going.
aren't
It
gonna
keeps going up.
pay for that up here. At best, we would maybe get $5 million out of a 15-year RDA project area, a CRA. You know.
And what do you think raw ground or ground that's purchased and scraped is valued at on Main Street in Kaysville? For example, what would this property be? We're 2/3 of an acre on Main Street in Kaysville. What's its basic value?
I have no idea.
Anybody know?
I don't even know what.
I would think it's at
300 or
least 400,000 or
400,000.
Yeah,
At least.
At least that.
I'm sure it's more than.
2/3 commercial?
2/3 of an acre, you know.
I don't know.
So to do true mixed use, you need 3 or 4 parcels like that to do
Sure, so
something
you're
that's really
you're
dynamic.
spending a couple $1 million on
Spending
property.
half of the total
Yep.
RDA. So
Yeah.
it's hard.
Yeah, it is hard.
I'm a dreamer, but I'm also a realist. There's nobody who loves this mixed-use stuff more than me. But I also see missed opportunity after missed opportunity when we just go, well, people don't want it, people don't like it. Well, sorry. You know, in Holiday, we were damn lucky to get that mixed-use center built because the people who lived 100 yards from 2300 East and Holiday Boulevard were squawking about it. We don't want this. Well, the rest of the community did. All 31,000 people wanted that mixed-use downtown. But we had strong, well-to-do, and determined neighbors to say, nope, you can't have height. Nope, you can't have density. And what they did was they permanently sliced that Achilles tendon on the back of the leg of that center. It could be much better than it is if we had just had the courage to say, you live within 100 yards of the busiest intersection, the busiest street in the city. It's too bad that you don't like that. But you don't get to determine the quality of this area that we've invested so much in and that everybody else wants.
Well, and
that's the concern that I have.
That's kind of the concern here, because, that's Main Street. And that's
I like the term, and I hadn't thought about it. I've struggled to capture it in 2 words, but the tyranny of geography is really good.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you might have been going about your merry way, but where you live, it's inevitable something's going to change.
Yeah.
And you know where I live? I live on the end of Shepherd Lane. Does anybody remember what the end of Shepherd Lane looked like 27 years ago?
Yeah, it was pretty.
There was nothing out there, nothing but hundreds of acres of fields.
Yep.
And I thought, okay, I'm going to call the Farmington planner, I'm going to call the Kaysville city manager, because we didn't have a planner, because Kaysville didn't have a planner, to say, hey, what do you think is going to happen out here? What does your general plan say? I went to those communities, I looked at their maps, and guess what I got? I've got endless traffic now, and I've got 2 interchanges. And you know what? I'm okay with it. I'm not griping. I still have a great quality of life, even with all the growth, even with all the homes, and even with this giant house down at the end of my street that looks It's so gosh awful, it boggles your imagination. I don't know how it got a building permit. Even so, I consider myself incredibly lucky.
Because we don't not issue them if the building's unattractive.
You should see this.
And I would argue that we still don't have a planner.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You do a commendable job. I'm just saying, you've got to be able to put up with some change in your life.
Well,
And this is not catastrophic. And because of what I've gone through, I'll say, come down and compare with what I've got to go through.
Well,
and if I can be in favor of it, you can.
You think too that the development happens where the roads are the busiest, where the property is the most valuable, and now that West Davis corridor is coming in, that is going to change some elements on the west end of the city.
What should be built down there?
I don't know. We're hoping
use townhomes, condominiums, apartments. I would be in favor of all of those.
Yeah. Well,
because of the relative proximity to the interchange.
But the nature of that will change over the next 20 years because of the development, or because of the traffic that'll be coming through. There's limitations, right? Because of the wetlands that are, there's nowhere to go west of West Davis corridor. But I feel for these individuals that were here tonight and feel like they've been picked on over the years. But the reality is that, as you said, I mean, the tyranny of geography, like you chose to live next to Main Street, which was the main.
They didn't choose to have the women's shelter there. They didn't choose to have the trailer park there. They didn't choose to have.
Well, how long has the trailer park been there?
And
I mean, the trailer park's been there probably as long, if not longer, as their homes.
Patio homes before Hyde Park.
No, Lisa, who just moved here less than a year ago, she moved in and all that stuff was there. And yet she's like, more than our share.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, the development patterns happen along busy corridors. And that's where you have the most intense uses. That's where you have the most
But then we go
density.
back to Paul saying, why wasn't it up by Davis High? That's
Yeah,
Main Street. That's
exactly.
a corridor. That's
And I vote-
close to 89.
It's an imperfect system. I mean,
and that's exactly why I'm still so irritated about that, because I was the only planning commissioner who voted in favor of that rezone change to allow that to happen.
Because it would spread it out a lot.
No, I voted for that one.
The planning commission voted in.
Yeah, we voted in favor of that. It was like
It was the
unanimous, I
council
think.
that didn't.
It was the
I'm
council-
sorry,
it was the
you're right.
council.
I voted in favor of that rezone.
Yeah.
It was a 4-2, wasn't it?
No.
There were,
I think it was unanimous,
It was
actually.
unanimous planning commission.
on the rezone across from the church.
Yeah.
Ooh, I don't remember that. Okay, good. I'm relieved, because I was like, that was a great rezone. That was great. It should have gone through.
So to bring back full circle then, I've heard kind of both sides of, well, we could just keep on doing it the way we've always done it, or
Yeah.
we can make it one more tiered and one more step. Is
To me,
there?
it sounds like it's, no, don't.
Don't make it more complicated?
Don't
Please
require a
don't.
general
Please don't.
plan amendment.
Don't. There's a couple of reasons why. One, it adds time and cost. Time and cost has an impact on all of us, on those who don't have that place to live, okay? Every time we slow things, we slow money down, it causes a problem. And I know that doesn't sound very sexy, but when you have a recession, it's because money has been slowed down. The speed of money is what determines wealth and prosperity. And when you take a developer and you make them jump through hoop after hoop after hoop, just because like, oh, great, they walked away. We'll never know how good it could have been. What we missed
All
out
right,
on.
anybody have any anxiety then about leaving it as is?
No.
Let
Okay.
staff do
Let's
their
leave it as
job.
is.
I'll add one.
Sexy in a planning commission.
Let me add one thing to what I just said. Let staff do their job. The staff, when you do your job right as an urban planner, you are steering people away from those rezones and general plan changes when you know they're going to go down in flames. They're relying upon staff to give them some kind of guidance, because nobody wants to go through and just have staff say nothing, and then they get creamed at planning commission and council, right?
I'd like a raise for every time that I have told someone not to bother and they listened.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we're not doing our jobs if we don't. But then I've been criticized on the other end by community members and council members that says everything you bring to us that's a general plan amendment or a rezone is always supported by staff. And it's like, that's because the 35 crazy ideas that came to us, we looked at them and said, this will never pass.
And it doesn't get here. It doesn't get to you.
The crap proposals never got here because I did my job.
Exactly.
And they'll say, why are you always in
You're
favor? It's like, because we've looked at the general plan, and that's just what we do.
And
We're
you work with
paid.
them to get it to the point where it is acceptable.
Right, but then again, at the end of the day, if anybody plunks down their $400 and pays us, we'll process it regardless. But but getting to a point, right? And this is a new thing I'm ushering in to what I'm bringing to the Planning Commission and the City Council is actual recommendations. And going back to Commissioner Lott's point earlier, there's going to be times where it's going to be 6 of one and half dozen of the other, the way you look at the goals.
That was kind of tonight's.
It really.
And that's why I couldn't say yay, because it was, I couldn't.
And that's where it's really like, okay, so maybe the public input does push it over the edge one way or another.
That's why I think. Let's say that tonight's proposal goes to the council and the council is inclined to approve it, the rezone. I would say, great, but put the mixed-use overlay zone on it. Either way, because that's an area we're calling for mixed use. So put the mixed-use overlay zone with it.
They'd have to put
either way.
50% commercial.
I like that. Either way,
And
do
I
that,
think we
but
gave
don't
him
do it.
ideas. Like he could put an office in the front. I've seen the house next to the lot. He could buy her out. She rents it. And it's old. My friend lived in it. It's dilapidated. He could take the lot next to it, and then he could do so much more with mixed use.
Yep.
So, and I don't feel too bad because he's built right across the street. It's not like we're cutting him off the knees and say, you don't have any opportunity in Kaysville.
Well, here, I like what you're saying, and here's an idea. You could do a small insurance office, a small dental office on the front, especially if you can allow them to scoot it up to the street and they can get enough parking. And then you can have residential in the back.
Have you looked at our mixed use code, Paul?
Does it not allow that?
Well,
Professional building?
A professional building in front and residential in the back.
yes, it would allow
you could do
for horizontal mixed use.
Yep. Okay.
But there's some pretty strict requirements as to, like, you have to have 50%.
Percentages. It has some percentages.
50% residential, 50% commercial, and that's, so if you, so it would be a challenge. And that's, even with this mixed-use project that'll be coming in off of Flint, they're looking at doing mixed use on the front portion of the property and RM in the back to try and get it to pencil out.
Are they going to use the mixed-use overlay?
For a portion of it is their intent. But the mixed-use code needs some work. If you actually want to have mixed-use projects, which I don't know why you would have a zoning code if you don't, but there have also been comments made by some of the elected officials that they don't want them. And so they don't care to have a mixed-use code that could actually work.
Well, if you need a volunteer at any point in the future to help with looking, I'd be happy to volunteer my time.
Well, if we move on to the next, call to the public.
Call to public, yeah.
And then the reports.
Yeah, do you want to speak at call to public? It's your chance.
Bless your heart.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I'm Rick George. I'm here on actually behalf of the Northern Wasatch Association of Realtors. I love that we're talking about high-density housing or higher density.
Medium.
I agree. Well, medium, yes. Just more than
low.
One house per acre.
Yeah.
Yeah, graphic.
It exists. It's pricing. I don't know how my kids are going to afford anything if we don't change even more than 15%, but let's get there first before we talk about anything else. Thank you. Thank you for considering things like this. It breaks my heart because, I mean, I've had people who were almost clients until the market went up 20%, 25%. Thank goodness interest rates went up a little, but even with the interest rates year over year, Kaysville is 200,000 more than last year. average sales price. Yeah. And it's gonna keep happening until, I mean, I guess maybe if we run out of water, that'll fix it, but then we've got a whole different thing. But thank you for looking into that, thank you.
Well, speaking of water, when anybody brings up water as a reason not to do multiple family, I just want to,
Without
just
yards,
scream and
you
go, are you
save so
kidding
much
me?
water.
It's
Yeah.
free.
Stop my neighbors from watering so much and that.
I'm going to water my one time tonight this week, and on my half acre, I'm going to put out what, about 5,000 gallons of water. Do you know how much 5,000 gallons of water will do in terms of laundry and your dishwasher? Do you know how many residential units you can support with just the irrigation water on my half acre?
If you don't water, it doesn't grow, and then you don't have to pay someone to mow it.
There you go. But then code enforcement will be after me because I got a fire hazard.
There's a local states class from the conservation district this Saturday.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, other
number
matters
9,
of business.
reports, correspondence calendar.
On other matters, what's happening with the appeals process? Ordinance change, anything?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm happy to
I
throw
went to what
something
I know.
out to you,
I
but-
did a couple months ago. I think I downloaded Murray's ordinance. I think, you said Salt, was it, who has another good one that we could look at?
Oh my gosh, it's been so long ago now, I'm trying to remember whose I was referring
Holiday
to.
had a good one. So,
We're talking about appeals or
Yeah, appeals
Yeah.
process.
or what?
We don't have a good appeals process.
Oh,
in our
yeah,
code.
we've got a decent matrix.
I actually looked at, I'm confused as to the placement of some, like, there's an appeal process in Chapter 8, or Title 18,
Yeah.
which is the building title, but it talks
That's
about
yeah.
variance that's
No.
like land use.
That's,
And
yeah.
I wonder why it's there.
I agree.
I wonder if there was some mistake made. I wanted to kind of research a little bit into that, but it's on my list.
Do you not have a separate section for appeals?
We don't.
Its
No,
own section?
they don't.
Okay, then I'm going to send you Holidays.
Okay.
Because it tells you if it's an appeal of staff, it goes here. If it's an appeal of the planning commission, it goes here. If it's an appeal that, and it's not the best, it's not the worst, but it's a good start.
Okay. And then I think we will be bringing a text amendment to you in the next couple months with the mixed-use ordinance for a couple reasons. I have some pretty big concerns about the parking reductions that were allowed based on proximity to transit. I just don't think that.
We don't have a lot of proximity to transit. here.
Well, no, but I think it could be. I just have concerns that, like, oh, there's a bus stop,
I know.
and then you get a 20% reduction.
Well, that's why I say, we
And
don't have a lot of
It's
transit.
way too much for Kaysville. It's way too aggressive. If it was a quarter of a mile from the park and ride, I think it's way too aggressive for Kaysville for the type of transit that we have here. There may be an opportunity to increase height allowances if specific types of developments were to come to us. As an example, if we were to have a hotel come and 35 feet just isn't enough for a hotel, would we want to consider increasing to 4 stories to generate transient room tax?
Or a sliding on height, where you slide it, so you go in, you can go
Sure,
up, the
you
further
step up.
in, the further you
Yes,
can go up.
yeah.
But there's lots of creative stuff out
Yeah.
there that I've worked on, I can help with
Yeah,
that.
and I think just even providing for flexibility in that, because again, every mixed-use project is going to require a development agreement. And so to give the ability for the city council to approve a development agreement that says, look, we'll give flexibility in height depending on what type of a project you're bringing to us, even up to 50 feet. But that has to be a commercial building. It has to generate revenues. It's, we're not just going to give 5 or 6 stories to apartment complexes, which was a request from someone earlier this week. And I told him I didn't think that the community would support, or the elected officials would support, essentially having 5 or 6 stories for only apartments. I just don't think that's Kaysville. So bringing that to you. We're kind of, I think, once we get this general plan adopted, I can hopefully start working on some of these other things like the appeals process and the bylaws and some of those other things that I've mentioned.
Yeah.
So with the calendar, we sent out the email about the planning conferences that are coming up. We did have several of you respond. We love that there's an option to just do like a one-day attendance. So, let's get you registered for any of those. I think both Dan and I are registered for the APA conference down in Lehigh. I may attend the Planners Day for the League of Cities. That would be another good one for the commissioners if you can afford to take a day. That's a lot of planning commission members attend that day at the League conference, which is just down at the Salt Lake or the Salt Palace. That's what they still call it, right? It's the Salt Palace. Okay. So, and then the one in October obviously is a good one as well down in Sandy. Nice thing is that these are all within driving distance for us and easy to get there for a day. So let us know. We'll get you registered. And
if there's certain ones that you prefer we attend, or I particularly,
Sure.
since I know, let me know.
Yeah,
I just went off my calendar, and if this is next door to my work, I can walk. This is
Yep,
great.
I think.
Oh, they're all really good.
Yeah, and I think you're just going to have to get used to kind of drinking from a fire hose in any of those sessions, because I think they're going to be a lot, especially just being a few weeks in, couple months into being a planning commissioner. But that's also how you learn. So
if you're limited in time and which one, you couldn't go wrong in picking any one of them.
Yeah.
Just whatever one maybe works best for your schedule, pick it, and it'll be good.
Or whatever's
Any one
closest,
of
like
them.
you were saying. Yeah. If it's most convenient for you, more likely to attend. I mean, that's a great reason to pick one. So, and then we'll keep you informed too. We'll still have, the league is going to start getting back into having, I think, more training sessions and webinars and things that we'll send out your way as well.
I want to just flip back quickly to the rezone tonight as I look at the ordinance again here, the mixed-use ordinance. And I don't know how we could have appropriately done this, but because their request was just straight up a rezone to residential. And, if the concern is for them might be the amount of commercial on such a small lot, as Paul's talking about. If it's zoned residential, they can go as small as 30% of the area that has to be commercial, which is smaller than if it's zoned commercial. In that regard, but it's still mixed use. In that regard, I think I would support rezoning it to residential as long as it was also had the mixed use overlay with it.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure, that's a recommendation we could make because that's not what they requested.
Yeah.
So it's.
But I think that's a good suggestion.
It may be something to talk if you talk to the applicant, when you talk to the applicant again, maybe to suggest something like that.
Well, and I also had thoughts too that, all the projects that he mentioned, it's all residential.
Yeah.
So to do something like that, they
Maybe
may have to
different
find a
for him.
partner.
Yeah.
Or they may just say, you know what, that's not
us.
what we do.
We're not going to do it. Yeah.
And either way, right, whatever works.
Yeah.
So. Well, I think that's all I have. Anything from the rest of the planning commission?
No.
Cool.
Okay. We have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Okay.
Thank
We're
you,
adjourned.
everyone.
I'll get you some comments first.
Okay.
On your email today.
That'll be good.
I finally got it to work for about 5:30, but I was baking cookies, so.
Just read through that.
I'm kind of a night owl, so I'll probably just get you some.
Oh, that's
before
good.
midnight.
Oh, that's fine. No problem, Paul.
I'm really excited to have Wade there.
Oh, it'll be good. I think it'll be a good session. We're actually trying to light a fire. Because I think there's a lot of support for doing this, for at least for the administrative land use decisions.
Yeah, no,
changing the process.
that's just a fact over
But
there,
it's
yeah.
been something nobody's dared to touch because they're afraid they're gonna get scorched by the public reaction.
Sorry if I